The sun was setting over Silver Creek, casting a warm golden light across the dusty streets. This small town seemed to hold its breath each evening, as the sound of hooves and laughter filled the air. Silver Creek was a place where cowboys gathered after a long day's work, seeking a bit of excitement and camaraderie. The saloon stood proudly in the center, its wooden sign creaking gently in the breeze. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with energy. Locals filled the room, their voices mingling with the sound of clinking glasses and raucous laughter. The smell of whiskey and tobacco wafted through the air as poker chips clattered on the table, signaling that fortunes could change in an instant. The regular players were seated around the green felt table, some with tired eyes, others brimming with anticipation for a night of cards. As patrons shared stories and bets, the saloon became a mix of camaraderie and competition. Patrons played not just for money but for pride and reputation, proving their skills as they aimed to outsmart one another. Little did they know that tonight would be different. A stranger cowboy was about to walk through those swinging doors and turn this ordinary evening into a tale of courage and risk that none would soon forget. Just as the laughter reached its peak, the saloon doors swung open with a creak, and in walked the stranger cowboy. Dust swirled around his boots as he stepped inside, instantly drawing the eyes of every patron in the room. His weathered hat tilted low over his brow, casting a shadow across his rugged face. The faded leather of his coat hugged his broad shoulders, hinting at countless days spent under the scorching sun. A hush fell over the lively chatter as he made his way to the bar, each step purposeful and confident. The bartender paused mid-pour, his mouth slightly agape at this newcomer, who seemed to carry an air of mystery and determination. The stranger surveyed the room with keen eyes, taking in the atmosphere filled with anticipation and camaraderie. He could feel the weight of scrutiny from all corners, curiosity mixed with something else, perhaps respect for someone willing to step into their domain. After a moment, he turned towards the poker table where players sat ready for action, their expressions shifting from surprise to intrigue. With a slight smirk playing on his lips, he approached them, fully aware that he was about to shake things up. The townsfolk whispered among themselves, wondering who this stranger was and what bold move he would make next. As the stranger cowboy stepped closer to the poker table, the murmur of conversation faded into a tense silence. The regular players eyed him warily, each sizing up the newcomer. With an air of confidence that demanded attention, he tipped his hat back just enough for them to glimpse a fierce gaze filled with determination. When he reached the table, he paused, letting the weight of his presence settle. The dim light flickered above, casting shadows on his face as he spoke with a gravelly voice that resonated in the stillness. "I'll bet my freedom on this first hand," he declared boldly, a smirk lighting up his rugged features. The players exchanged bewildered glances, disbelief etched on their faces. They had seen many gamblers come and go, but never one so willing to put everything on the line right from the start. One player, a burly man known as Hank, chuckled with skepticism. "What do you mean by freedom, stranger?" With a steady gaze and unwavering resolve, the cowboy explained that he was bound by debts and owed to men who wouldn't hesitate to take his life if he lost. The tension in the room thickened. Some players whispered among themselves while others leaned in closer, intrigued by his audacity. The stakes had suddenly risen higher than anyone had anticipated, setting the stage for an unforgettable night of high-stakes poker. As the tension filled the air, the players at the table began to reveal themselves. First was Hank, the burly man with a thick beard and a reputation for toughness. His eyes narrowed with suspicion, and a grin crept across his face as he leaned back in his chair, clearly intrigued by the stranger's audacity. "You've got guts, I'll give you that," he said, crossing his arms over his chest. Next was Clara, a sharp-witted woman known for her poker skills and quick thinking. She was known to be just as fierce as any man in Silver Creek, often leaving her opponents in disbelief. Clara looked at the stranger with a mix of admiration and skepticism. "Freedom is a high price for a hand of poker," she remarked thoughtfully, tapping her fingers against the table. Then there was Joe, a wiry gambler with a penchant for bluffing. He had been on a winning streak lately and wasn't about to let anyone ruin it. Joe chuckled softly, rubbing his hands together. I'll say this, if you're betting freedom, you must really want to play. Just don't get too attached to it, he taunted. The atmosphere crackled with competitive energy as each player weighed their options, eager to prove themselves against this bold newcomer. The regulars were no strangers to risk, but this was something exceptionally daring, igniting their instincts to compete fiercely against one another. As the players contemplated the stranger's bold wager, the weight of what betting one's freedom truly meant began to sink in. For the cowboy, freedom was not just a word. It represented his entire existence. Only a few days prior, he had found himself trapped in a web of debt after a foolish gamble that had gone terribly wrong. Menacing figures from whom he borrowed money were now hunting him down, their intentions far from kind. He had been living in fear, constantly looking over his shoulder and knowing that if he lost this bet, he would be taken back to face a fate he could not bear. The thought of captivity loomed over him like a dark cloud, promising a life of servitude or worse. He had heard tales of those who lost and were forced into labor or left to wander the wilderness with only their regrets for company. In this moment, at the poker table surrounded by competitors, he saw an opportunity, a chance to reclaim his life with one daring play. The stakes were higher than mere money. They involved his very soul. His heart raced as he prepared to face whatever the cards might bring, knowing that this gamble could either win him his freedom or plunge him deeper into despair. The other players felt the gravity of his risk, their expressions shifting from skepticism to a grudging respect for a man willing to stake everything on the turn of a card. The dealer, a seasoned veteran named Slim, stood at the head of the table, his calm demeanor contrasting sharply with the tension that surrounded him. With a practiced hand, he shuffled the cards, their smooth edges gliding together in a rhythmic dance. The sound of the cards sliding against each other echoed softly in the saloon, heightening the anticipation that hung in the air. As he continued to shuffle, Slim stole a glance at each player, noting their expressions and body language. The regulars were fidgety, some tapping their fingers on the table, while others exchanged nervous glances. The stranger cowboy remained still, his gaze fixed intently on Slim as if willing the dealer to hurry. There was something about this moment that felt electric. Viewers nearby leaned in closer, eager to witness the unfolding drama. Once satisfied with the shuffle, Slim cut the deck with a swift motion and began dealing the cards one by one. The first card slid across the table toward Hank, then Clara, and finally Joe before making its way to the cowboy. Each player's pulse quickened as they caught sight of their hands, faces revealing a mix of hope, fear, and determination. With every card dealt, whispers filled the saloon as patrons speculated on what kind of luck would favor the players tonight. The stakes felt impossibly high. For each player and especially for the stranger, this hand could change everything. As the cards lay face down on the table, a thick tension enveloped the players. Hank squinted at his hand, revealing a pair of aces, a solid start that gave him a rush of confidence. He leaned back in his chair and grinned, feeling the thrill of having the upper hand. Clara, however, remained composed, her eyes flickering between her cards and Hank's reactions. She didn't want to give anything away just yet. Across from them, Joe let out a chuckle as he revealed a modest hand, feigning nonchalance while calculating his next move. The stranger cowboy's expression was unreadable. He studied his cards carefully without giving any hint of excitement or concern. His calm demeanor stood in stark contrast to the palpable anxiety around him. As the players began to bet, Hank raised the stakes, forcing Clara and Joe to match his bet or fold. Clara hesitated but then pushed forward with her chips, feeling bold despite her weaker hand. Joe followed suit but shot Hank a wary glance. The dealer, Slim, observed attentively as the escalating bets reflected their eagerness for victory. Each decision carried weight. Would they play conservatively or take risks? With every tick of the clock and stir of chips, it felt as if fate itself balanced on the edge of that table, especially for the stranger whose very freedom was now intertwined with this unfolding game. As the final round of betting concluded, the tension crackled in the air like a thunderstorm about to break. The four players fixed their gazes on the dealer, Slim, who wore a neutral expression despite the chaos brewing around him. "Show your hands," he instructed, his voice steady but laced with anticipation. Hank, confident in his strong pair of aces, flipped his cards over with a triumphant grin. "2 aces," he declared, leaning back with satisfaction as he imagined victory within his grasp. Clara's heart raced as she revealed her cards. 2 pairs, 9s and 7s. A solid hand that held promise but wasn't quite enough. She frowned slightly, knowing she had to compete against Hank's advantage. Next, Joe revealed his cards. A curious mix that left him with only a single pair. "Not my best hand," he admitted with a half-hearted chuckle, disappointment washing over him. Finally, all eyes turned to the stranger cowboy. He took a deep breath, feeling every heartbeat pulse through his veins. With a slow but deliberate motion, he turned over his cards. 3 kings. The saloon erupted into muffled gasps and whispers as realization struck the audience. The atmosphere shifted from tension to disbelief. He had not only claimed victory but had snatched away Hank's confidence in an instant. As the other players processed their defeat, the stranger felt a surge of hope. With one daring bet, he regained not just his freedom but newfound respect from those who had doubted him. The saloon was filled with a mix of astonishment and excitement as the realization of the stranger's victory sank in. With a triumphant smile breaking across his face, he felt an overwhelming sense of relief wash over him. The weight of his gamble had lifted, and for the first time in days, he felt a glimmer of hope for his future. His freedom was secured, and that meant everything to him. Hank, though initially brimming with confidence, leaned forward in disbelief as he processed the outcome. The room had fallen silent, and each player's gaze turned toward him, expecting a reaction. Realizing he had underestimated the stranger's skill, his pride took a hit, but deep down, he respected the man for daring to challenge him. Clara nodded to the stranger, acknowledging his clever play with genuine admiration. She recognized that true strength lay not just in a good hand, but in having the courage to take risks when it mattered most. Joe, slightly bewildered by how quickly the tables had turned, could only chuckle softly as he collected his modest losses. With newfound respect from fellow players and patrons alike, the stranger cowboy felt a shift in how he was perceived. No longer just an outsider, he was now part of this community, a man who risked it all and emerged victorious. As laughter and conversations resumed around him, he knew this night would forever change his destiny in Silver Creek. In the days that followed the stranger's dramatic win, Silver Creek buzzed with chatter and speculation. News of his bold gamble spread like wildfire, painting him as both a fearless player and a cautionary tale for those who underestimated their opponents. Many locals saw him as a hero who faced peril and emerged victorious, earning their admiration and respect. However, not everyone was pleased with the shift in dynamics. Hank, nursing his bruised ego, found it hard to accept being outplayed in front of the entire saloon. He began to plot ways to reclaim his pride, feeling the weight of rivalry hanging over him like a storm cloud. Meanwhile, Clara viewed the Cowboys' victory with interest. She believed he could be a valuable ally in her future games, sensing potential in his skill that went beyond luck. As more and more players entered the saloon to challenge the newcomer, new rivalries began to form. Some were eager to prove themselves against the stranger who had taken the room by storm, while others respected him enough to welcome him into their fold. The atmosphere became charged with excitement and competition. Yet beneath it all, whispers of Hank's resentment lingered. The stranger's arrival had changed more than just his status. It had stirred an undercurrent of conflict that would take time to settle. With stakes forever raised in Silver Creek, everyone sensed that this was just the beginning of a complex game unfolding far beyond a simple hand of cards. Later that evening, as the saloon filled with laughter and renewed camaraderie, the stranger cowboy found a quiet corner to himself. He leaned back against the wall, reflecting on the whirlwind of events that had just unfolded. The thrill of victory coursed through him, but beneath that excitement lay a deeper sense of appreciation for what freedom truly meant. For too long, he had felt the weight of fear pressing down on him, shackled by debt and the looming threat of those who sought to reclaim what he owed. But tonight, He had defied the odds and taken a chance that changed everything. He realized that freedom was not merely the absence of physical restraints. It was the ability to make choices without fear, to carve out one's own path, and to finally breathe without looking over his shoulder. As he sipped his drink, he thought about the risks he had taken. It dawned on him that true courage often meant putting everything on the line. He had been willing to gamble not just his life but also his dignity in pursuit of a brighter future. Now, as he watched the familiar faces around him, once strangers but now allies, he felt a sense of belonging. Regardless of what challenges lay ahead, he knew that freedom was worth every risk he had taken. He was no longer just a wanderer. He was part of something bigger in Silver Creek, and that realization filled him with hope for tomorrow.